Okay. Welcome, my dears, to the annual reading of The Princess Bride by S. Morgenstern.
Yay!
Great.
Chapter 1. Buttercup was raised on a small farm in the country of Florin. Her favorite pastimes were riding
her horse and tormenting the farm boy that worked there. His name was Wesley, blah, 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 blah. Isn't that a wonderful beginning?
I'm sorry, what is happening here?
Do you want to tell the story this year?
No, I don't. I've heard it like 15 kajillion times.
Oh, it's the annual reading. I thought you were looking forward to it.
Well, I thought I would too, but that's the problem.
What problem? What happened? A problem?
Let's try something different this time. Well, in school, I've been reading a piece of a book that I really like, and I'd love to share it with you and Mom. Are you ready for this?
I don't know if I'm ready for this.
What is this?
It's called Odd and the Frost Giants by Neil Gaiman.
Odd and the Frost Giants?
It's going to be good, trust me.
It's going to be odd.
Oh, boy.
Chapter 2. Odd was woken by...
Hey. What happened to chapter 1?
It was boring. You don't need it.
Normally, we start at the very beginning.
It's a very good place to start.
Well, we're starting at chapter 2.
As you wish.
Odd was woken by something scratching against the hut. He pulled himself up to his feet, then opened the door. It was daylight outside, which meant it was late in the morning, and a fox was staring up at him insolently from the snow. When it saw that Odd was watching, it took a dancing step or two towards Odd and turned away, then looked back at Odd as if it were inviting him to follow. It was, Odd concluded, an animal with a plan. He had no plans, and it was not every day that you got to follow a fox. So he did. There was a bird circling high overhead. A hawk, Odd thought, and then it landed in a dead tree, and he realized how big it was and knew it was an eagle. Its head was cocked oddly to one side, and Odd was convinced it was watching him. He followed the fox up a hill and down another, to a place where a dead pine tree stuck out from the hill like a rotten tooth. A silver birch tree grew close beside the dead pine, and it was there that the fox stopped. A mournful bellow greeted him. The dead tree had a hole in one side, the kind that bees sometimes inhabit and fill with honeycomb. An enormous brown bear had its front paw caught in the hollow of the pine tree. It was obvious what had happened. In order to get at the pine tree hollow, the bear had leaned its weight against the birch tree, bending it down and moving it out of the way. But the moment the bear had pushed its paw into the hole, it had taken its weight off the birch, which had snapped back. And now the bear was profoundly trapped. The animal bellowed once more. It looked miserable, but not as if it were about to attack. Warily, Odd walked towards the tree. Above them, the eagle circled. Odd unhooked his axe from his belt. He cut a piece of wood about 6 inches long and used it to prop the two trees apart. He did not want to crush the bear's paw. Then, with clean, economical blows, he swung the blade of his axe against the birch. The bear looked at Odd with big brown eyes.
I can't run, so if you want to eat me, you'll find me easy prey. But I should have worried about that before, shouldn't I? Too late now.
He took a deep breath and swung the axe one last time. The birch tree tipped and fell away from the bear, who blinked and pulled its paw from the hollow in the pine tree. The paw was dripping with honey. The bear reached into the tree, pulled out a huge lump of comb, and finished it off in a couple of bites. Then it stood up on its hind legs and roared. Odd wondered if he was going to die now, if the honey had just been an appetizer. But the bear got down on all fours once more and continued, single-mindedly, to empty the tree of honey. Odd knew it was time for him to head home. He tried to hurry, and he stumbled on a patch of ice and his crutch went flying. He landed face first in the hard snow. He crawled toward his crutch, and as he did so, he felt hot breath on the back of his neck.
Hello, bear. You had better eat me. I'll be more use as bear food than I will be frozen to death on the ice.
The bear did not seem to want to eat Odd. It sat down on the ice in front of him and gestured with its paw.
You mean it? You aren't going to eat me.
The bear made a rumbling sort of noise in the back of its throat. But it was a gloomy noise and not a hungry noise, and Odd decided to chance his luck. The day could not get any stranger after all.
Wow. Okay. He is awfully daring for a kid, going face to face with a bear.
Well, he's a Viking. He's a strong kid.
Wasn't his leg broken?
Yeah.
And where is this boy's parents? I mean, what kind of book is this?
It's a book, Mom. Besides, doesn't somebody die in The Princess Bride?
Okay. I see your point. Go on.
He clambered onto the bear's back, holding his crutch with his left hand and clutching the bear's fur with his right. The bear stood up slowly, making sure the boy was on, then set off at a fast lope through the twilight. The fox dashed ahead of them. The eagle flew above them, and Odd thought crazily, happily.
I'm just like one of the brave lords in my mother's ballads. Only without the horse, the dog, and the falcon. I can never tell anyone about this, because they wouldn't believe it. Because even I wouldn't believe it.
Snow fell from branches as they brushed past and stung his face, but he laughed as they went, because his hut was waiting for him, and he was an impossible lord riding a bear, and because he was Odd. The bear stopped in front of Odd's hut, and Odd half climbed, half fell from the beast's back. He pulled himself up with his crutch, and then he said,
"Thank you."
There was a crash of wings, and the eagle landed on the snow a few feet from Odd. It tipped its head on one side to stare at Odd with an eye the color of honey. There was nothing but darkness where its other eye should have been. He walked up to his door. The fox was already waiting there, sitting like a dog. The bear padded up to the hut behind him. Odd looked from one animal to the other.
"I suppose you had better come in."
He opened the door, and they came in. Chapter 3. Odd had imagined that the sight of salmon would feed him for a week or more, but bears and foxes and eagles all, he discovered, eat salmon, and he felt that feeding them was the least he could do to thank them for seeing him home. They ate until it was all gone, but only Odd and the eagle seemed satisfied.
"We'll find more food tomorrow. Sleep now."
The animals stared at him. He walked over to the straw mattress and climbed onto it, placing his crutch carefully against the wall. Odd closed his eyes and he was asleep. Dreams of darkness, of flashes, and nothing that comforted him. And then into the dream came a booming, gloomy voice.
"It wasn't my fault."
"Oh, right. I told you not to go pushing that tree down. You just didn't listen."
"I was hungry. I could smell the honey. You don't know what it was like smelling that honey. It was better than mead, better than roasted goose. And you, of all people, don't need to go blaming anyone else. It's because of you we're in this mess."
Silence!
There was silence. Odd rolled over. It was just him and the fox and the bear and the eagle. He sat up, leaned against the wall. The bear and the eagle both ignored him. The fox darted him a green-eyed glance.
"You were talking."
The animals looked at Odd and at one another. If they did not actually say, "Who, us?" it was there in their expressions and the way they held themselves.
"Somebody was talking, and it wasn't me. That means it was you lot. And there's no point in arguing."
We weren't arguing because we can't talk. Oops.
Okay, seriously? Drunk bears and mead? Children talking to wild animals? I mean, what kind of message is this book trying to deliver?
It's a Neil Gaiman story.
I'm sorry, who?
You said this was about superheroes.
I mean, seriously, where's Chris Hemsworth?
Chris who? You know who's a good superhero? The Shadow.
Who's the Shadow?
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of man? The Shadow knows.
Oh, don't get him started. It's a whole big thing. Just go on.
The fox and the eagle glared at the bear, who put a paw over its eyes and looked ashamed of itself.
"Which one of you wants to explain what's going on?"
"Nothing's going on. Just a few talking animals. Nothing to worry about. Happens every day. We'll be out of your hair first thing in the morning."
Tell.
Why me?
Oh, I don't know. Possibly because it's all your fault.
That's a bit much, blaming the whole thing on a chap like that. Could have happened to any of us.
What could? And why can you talk?
We can talk because beneath these animal disguises we wear, well, not the actual disguises. I mean, we are actually a bear and a fox and a big bird, which is a rotten sort of thing to happen. But where was I?
Gods.
Gods?
Gods. I was just getting to that. I am great Thor, Lord of the Thunders. The eagle is Lord Odin, All-Father, greatest of the gods. And this runt-eared meddling box is
Loki, blood brother to the gods, smartest, sharpest, most brilliant of all the inhabitants of Asgard.
brilliant.
You would have fallen for it. Anyone would.
Fallen for what?
I'll tell you. Could have happened to anyone. So, Asgard, home of the mighty, in the middle of a plain, surrounded by an impregnable wall, built for us by a frost giant.
The giant wanted the sun and the moon.
If you interrupt me one more time, I will not only stop talking, but I shall go off on my own and leave the two of you to fend for yourselves. In the great hall of Odin sat all the gods, drinking mead, eating, and telling stories. They drank and bragged and fought and boasted and drank all through the night. Fires in the halls burned low, and most of the gods slept where they sat, heads resting on wooden tables. And yet, there was one among the gods who had drunk and eaten more than any of the others, and still was not sleepy. That was I, Loki, called Skywalker. I wandered out from the hall and walked with my shoes that step on air up to the top of the wall around Asgard. In the moonlight, standing beneath the wall, I saw the most beautiful woman anyone has ever seen. And in a voice like the striking of a harp string, she called out to me.
Hail, brave warrior.
Hail, most beautiful of creatures. And what would a young lady of such loveliness be doing, wandering alone and at night, with wolves and trolls and orcs on the loose? Let me offer you hospitality.
I cannot accept your offer. I have promised my father that I will not give my heart to any but he who possesses one thing.
And that one thing is?
The hammer of Thor.
Ha! Pausing only to tell her not to go anywhere, my feet flew, and like the wind I rushed to the great hall. They were all asleep. There was Thor, his face on the gravy-covered wooden trencher, and hanging from his side, the hammer. Only the nimble fingers of Loki, wiliest and cleverest, could have teased it from the belt without waking Thor. Heavy it was, the hammer. Too heavy to carry if you are not Thor. And yet, not too much for my genius. I took off my shoes, and I tied them, one to the handle and one to the head. Then I snapped my fingers, and the hammer followed me. I hurried to the gates of Asgard. I unbarred them, and the maiden was there. She was sitting on a boulder, and she was weeping.
Why the tears, O loveliness itself?
I weep because once I saw you, great and noble Lord. I knew I could never love another. And yet I am doomed to give my heart only to he who lets me touch the hammer of Thor.
Dry your tears, and behold, the hammer of Thor.
She stopped crying then, and reached out her delicate hands and held the hammer tightly. For a moment, I thought she had begun to cry once again. And then I knew she was laughing. but the noise she made was not a sweet, tinkling, maidenly laugh. It was a deep, crashing noise, like an ice sheet grinding against a mountainside. The maiden pulled my shoes from the hammer and dropped them to the ground. She held the hammer as if it was a feather. A wave of cold engulfed me, and I found myself looking up at a man, big as a high hill, icicles hanging from his beard. And he said,
"After so long, all it took was one oath, and Asgard is ours." And you need to be something else.
I felt a tail pushing its way out from the base of my spine. My fingers shrank into paws and claws. Not a nice feeling at all.
It was worse for us. One moment you're fast asleep, dreaming about thunderstorms, and the next you're being scrunched into a bear. They turned the Allfather into an eagle.
Rage!
The giant laughed at us, waving my hammer around all the while, and then he forced Heimdall to summon the Rainbow Bridge and exiled the three of us to Midgard. There's no more to tell.
There was silence then in the tiny hut, only the crackle and spit of a pine branch on the fire.
Well, gods or not, I can't keep feeding you if this winter keeps going. I don't think I can keep feeding me.
We won't die, because we can't die, but we'll get hungry and we'll get more wild. It's something that happens when you have taken on animal form. Stay in it too long and you become what you pretend to be.
So is that why the winter isn't ending?
The frost giants like the winter. They are the winter.
And if spring never comes? If summer doesn't happen? If this winter just goes on forever?
The bear said nothing. The fox swished its tail impatiently. They looked at the eagle. It tilted its head back, and with one fiery yellow eye, it stared at Odd.
Death.
Eventually. It's happened before, back when we had wars with the frost giants at the dawn of time. When they won, huge sheets would cover this part of the world. When we won, we always did, the ice sheets would retreat and the spring would return. But we were gods then, not animals.
Well then, we'll set off as soon as it gets light enough to travel.
Set off? For where?
Asgard, of course.
Odd is really going to help these wild animals?
They aren't just animals, Ma. They're gods. How else are they going to get into Asgard?
What's the Asgard?
It's not the Asgard. It's just Asgard. It's their home. You don't say the New York, do you?
Oh, well, excuse me, Professor.
And they're letting him go with a broken leg. What kind of gods are these?
You know what, though, Mom? Pain builds character.
Oh, no. Who have you been hanging out with?
With Grandpa. Chapter 4. Odd was riding on the bear's back. The fox trotted along beside them. High above them, the eagle rode the winds. The sun shone in a cloudless blue sky, and it was colder than it had been when there was cloud cover.
This won't work. We don't have any way of getting to the Rainbow Bridge. And if by some miracle we crossed it, look at us. We're animals. And you can barely walk. We can't defeat the frost giants. This whole thing is hopeless.
If it's hopeless, why are you coming with me?
Nothing better to do.
Up here, it's a waterfall.
He clung tightly to the bear's fur as they clambered up the side of a steep hill. The waterfall was frozen, and ice ran from the crags down to the basin in twisted ropes and great clear icicles.
We used to come out here. And when the water came down and the sun was shining brightly, you could see a rainbow, like a huge circle all around the waterfall.
No water, no rainbow.
There's water, but it's ice.
He took the axe from his belt, pushed his crutch beneath his arm, and as he got down from the bear's back, and walked over to the ice. He stood before the frozen waterfall. He began to swing the axe. The noise of the blade hitting the thick icicle cracked off the hills around them. There was a crash, and an icicle as large as Odd smashed down to the surface of the frozen pool.
Clever. You broke it.
Yes. I think the rainbows are imprisoned in the ice when the water freezes.
The boy took out his knife and began to trace outlines on the ice block with the blade, scoring it as best he could. The eagle circled high above them, almost invisible in the midwinter sun.
He's been up there a long time. Do you think he's looking for something?
I worry about him. It must be hard to be an eagle. He could get lost in there.
Odd put his knife down and took out his axe once more.
I've seen rainbows on the snow sometimes, and on the side of buildings, when the sun shone through the icicles. And I thought, ice is only water, so it must have rainbows in it too. When the water freezes, the rainbows are trapped in it, like fish in a shallow pool, and the sunlight sets them free.
Odd knelt on the frozen pond. He hit the big lump of ice with his axe. This did nothing. The axe just glanced off the ice and nearly cut into his leg.
Do that again and you'll break the axe. Hold on.
He nosed along the bank of the frozen pool for several minutes. Then he began scrabbling at the snow.
Here, this is what you need.
He put his paw on a gray rock he had revealed. Odd pulled at the stone, which came up easily from the ground, and it proved to be a flint. Part of it was gray, but the other part, the translucent part of the flint, was a deep salmon pink color. Odd brought the tool over to the lump of ice, and then he began to attack the ice with the flint. The rock felt warm in his hands, hot even. The ice fell away under the flint axe, just as Odd had wanted it to. He hacked it into a shape that was almost triangular, thicker on one side than on the other. Odd took his ice triangle and placed it so that the sunlight shone through it onto the white snow that drifted on the frozen pool. Nothing happened. He twisted it, tilted it, moved it around, and a puddle of light appeared on the snow, all the colors of the rainbow.
How's that?
But it's on the ground. It should be in the air. I mean, how can that be a bridge?
The eagle took off from the tree with a clap of wings and began to fly upwards.
I don't think he's very impressed. Nice try.
Odd shrugged. He could feel his mouth pulling into a smile even as his heart sank. He had been so proud of himself making a rainbow. He hefted the stone axe, was about to throw it hard away from him, and then a screech. Odd looked up to see the eagle plummeting towards them. He began to step back, marveling at the eagle's speed, wondering how the bird could pull out in time. But it didn't pull out. The eagle hit the patch of colored light on the white snow without slowing, as if it was diving into a pool of liquid water. The puddle of color splashed and opened. Scarlet fell softly about them, and everything was outlined in greens and blues, and the world was raspberry-colored and leaf-colored and golden-colored and fire-colored and blueberry-colored and wine-colored. Odd's world was colors, and he could feel himself falling forward, tumbling into the rainbow. Odd's eyes took moments to adjust, and when they did, above him was a velvet night sky hung with 1 billion stars. A rainbow arched across it, and Odd felt as if he was being carried up the arch, going upwards, forwards, uncertain of how fast he was traveling, only certain that it was the colors of the rainbow that were carrying him along. Odd's stomach gave sort of a lurch. He could feel himself dropping, and he turned his head to see the rainbow fading. Through the prism of colors, he saw huge fir trees, foggy and purple and blue and red. And then the trees came into focus and found their own color, a cool bluish green, as Odd tumbled off the side of a fir tree and down into a drift of snow. He was wet and cold, but unhurt. He glanced up, but there was no sign of the rainbow bridge. Silently across the thick snow, the fox and the bear were walking toward him. And then, with a rattle and a clatter, the eagle landed on a branch beside him, making the snow on the branch fall flop to the ground. The eagle looked less crazy now, thought Odd, and then it looks bigger.
Where is this place?
But he knew the answer, knew it even before the eagle threw back its head and screamed. with delight and with relish and with keen dark joy.
Asgard!
And that's the end of the story.
Wait.
What do you mean that's the end?
That's it.
What is this? We don't get the first chapter. We don't get the ending. What kind of story time is this?
That's really it. That's all I have for you guys.
What happens to Odd?
And who are the frost giants again? And what about Thor and Loki and Odin?
I don't know. This is the end. It's just a little excerpt. I mean, I wish I had more, but the book is like $12.
Yeah, and?
Well, $12 is a lot of money.
Darling, I know that things are a little bit tight right now, but you can always ask me for money for a book. There's always book money.
$12.
I'm
I want to hear the
trying.
end of this story.
Are you sure you guys want to read the rest? It's not The Princess Bride or nothing.
Nah, I heard that one 1,000,000 times. I want to hear the end of this.
Okay, as you wish.
Clever.
You know, I think I can get this online.
Really?
Right, online way. Oh, save yourself money. Just buy the first chapter and then the end parts.
Yeah, I don't think that's how this works, Dad.
Yeah, I don't think that's how it works.
I'm gonna look for this guy. Who is the author?
Neil Gaiman.
All right, hold on. How do you spell it?
Gaiman.
Okay. I'm working on it.
You got it.
Get there.